Okay, I think we will start. I'm gonna do a little bit just on the whiteboard to begin with. I'm gonna talk a little bit about animation. That's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna do animation. And I want to first tell you a little bit about the different kinds of animation that you can use. You can use in Unity or any project that you like. So maybe if we go back to maybe original games like the original Quake or something like that. If you wanted to animate a model in one of these games, as you know, each model is created by specifying a few vertices, and then there are polygons that are drawn between the vertices to create the surface of the entire model. So if we have a low poly model, I don't know, this is kind of a lousy game character. Maybe there's a texture applied here, so you have actually the eyes and mouth over here. Maybe you put a couple of vertices out this way also for lousy hands. So to animate these models originally, you would actually move the vertices. I mean, you would basically figure out, like in this pose, every vertex is in this position. And as you maybe remember from computer graphics or other courses related to this, a model like this is basically stored in a vertex buffer where every vertex, vertex 1, vertex 2, vertex 3, they're all listed. And then the x, y, z coordinate of each vertex is stored along with other properties that are per vertex. So an animation would just basically take this and update the positions of these vertices according to your animation specification. So maybe as an animator, you would record some movement of these vertices. But this, this was maybe doable when you had simple models with a few vertices, few polygons, like in the early games. But then think about modern games with about 10,000 vertices, and this just becomes intractable. Like you would not want to be an animator finding all the vertices in the model and figuring out how those move just because you want to raise the arm of the model. So it was a little bit after this that people started using skeletons to do animation. And a skeleton creates basically another structure that is the bone definition for the character. So here's a simple bone definition. Maybe like this. And let's just simplify the head with one, but there's more. So what this is another model. So now we're talking about two different models in a way. We're talking about the model that defines the surface of a character through vertices and polygons, and we're talking about a different model that defines the bone structure of the character as a set of bones. And there are not, you can keep these guys simple, or you can make them complex. You can have a few bones, or you can have a lot of different bones. So you can just choose your complexity for animation and how you arrange these bones. And then there's a process that applies a skeleton like that to a model. And this is the process called skinning. So it's kind of like dressing up the bones in the skin. You could also say like you're taking this and inserting it into the skin. When you associate a bone structure or skeleton with a model like this, you are if you're doing this by hand yourselves, what you're doing is that you're taking a group of vertices like this group, and you're binding the group to a specific bone. You say every vertex within this group is affected by this bone in the skeleton. So if I move this bone, then all the vertices in this group will be displaced by the same amount as the bone. So that is the simplest mapping. You basically just do a kind of a on or off mapping. You know, these guys move with this bone, these guys move with this bone, and so on. You can also indicate weights for each of the vertices. So remember that this table, when I said before, like the vertex buffer, you have the vertices here. So one of the columns in that table that can be stored along with each vertex could be the weight that that particular vertex has with regards to a specific bone. So this vertex will move 50% of how much this bone moves. So you can go from 0 to 100%. So it could possibly, this vertex could possibly be affected by like the spine, maybe just a little bit. So it will still move a little bit. So you can do kind of a nice detailed mapping here between these two things. And once you are comfortable with this mapping, then you have what is called, you have rigged the character. You created you no longer just have a model, you have a character in a way that you now can control through this armature or skeleton when you move things. And now your animation system can just focus on the bones. The animation system is no longer concerned with this here. And the neat thing also about this is also that you could actually imagine, okay, I'm not going to draw 50,000 vertices obviously, but if you have another model that is much more complex, you can still use the same skeleton to animate it. You just have to again define these groups of vertices. And so you could use precisely the same animation clips for a low poly version and a high poly version. That's another useful feature of this approach, is that you can, which is called retargeting. Like if you have an animation for this skeleton that works perfectly with this character, and then you bring in another version of that character, or even a different character, you can retarget it, that animation to a different model altogether. But also there's a part of retargeting that maybe I'll come into too, is that when you create an animation for this skeleton, you're kind of stuck with this skeleton. You've now assumed that you have this arm and this front arm and things like that. So you're a little bit tied to this. But what if someone else brings in a character that already has been rigged with a nice skeleton and everything, maybe a few more bones than yours? Do you then throw out all of your animations because you can start over again? It is possible also to map from one, okay, let's say that I have another skeleton with much more bones. You can also do this. You can try to map from one skeleton to another skeleton. Actually, that is really what retargeting is about, is to take data that you have done for one skeleton and try to apply it to a different skeleton that might have slightly different bones. But that also implies that you might have a different model. So retargeting is an involved process both in terms of the bones and the models. So skeletal animation focuses on moving the bones, getting access to these bones through some kind of an animation system. And then you could actually create an animation in third-party tool like Blender, Maya, or something like that, where you drag around these bones and then you can store them and you load them in for this specific skeleton and you can play it back. So that's kind of how that is done. But there's one more type of animation that you should know about, and this animation, this kind of approach to animation is really good for moving the limbs of the character. Like you want to make the character reach for something, or the character to walk around or something. But what if you want to do something very detailed? like a facial expression. You just want to do a little bit in the face, something, um, or something other than that. Maybe something more detailed, like maybe the character has a wound or something that appears, and that changes a little bit the way the character looks. So that is that can be done through morph animation, through morph targets, they're called, and that goes a little bit back to this idea that you have. I'm gonna do another copy basically of the model. Goes a little bit back to the idea of modifying vertices. So you could, if you wanted to do something, some detailed reshaping of the character, you can just make a copy of it like this. But instead of trying to animate the vertices through a path to create some kind of a motion, like we talked about vertex animation before, in morph target or morph animation, you just have to find the final position of what you want the model to look like. So if I want to do some weird warping of the head as a part of a facial animation, like let's say that the head goes like this, I don't know, kind of, like the shape of the head changes, I can create the final shape that I want. I can even just identify that this morph is just taking place in this part of the body here and should not affect the other parts. And then I say this is the frame 0 and this is frame 100. And I just tell the animation system that this is where I want to get. But the animation system will fill in the movement of every vertex in this group to every vertex in this group along a linear interpolation. So this is so you can create kind of, so let's say that this movement here from this morph to this morph, I call something like head shrink from here, and then this becomes a morph that I can manipulate in my animation system. So when you bring in characters from somewhere into Unity, you can take a look at two things. Does the character contain a skeleton and allow you to do skeletal animation? If it doesn't have a skeleton, it won't be able to do any skeletal animation. However, Unity actually can insert its own skeleton in there if you really need to. So you have to make sure that it has a skeleton and the skeleton is selected. You can also see if the model itself, the model here, has morph targets. Try to figure out if the character actually contains morph targets. If it does, you can now access them also through your animation system in Unity and start modifying them. So you can have both going at the same time. So you can actually do an animation where you're leaning or something at the same time the head gets squished. So it's kind of neat that you can Unity supports both methods, and I think most game engines do. They are really allowing you the most flexibility possible here. But today I'm just gonna focus a bit on the skeletal animation today, and I'm just gonna show you one possible path for bringing in a model and animation into Unity and control it a bit through the animation controller in Unity. I mean, this is sort of basic stuff, but still at the same time, I myself get confused because of the different options that you have and different things you have to take care of. So let's just walk through it together, and let's see if we can make this work. And so I'm going to bring in Unity here, and I'm going to bring it up on the screen, of course, as well. So I'll take down the lights. And so I'll do this. So here we are in Unity, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start a new scene here, I'm gonna do a new scene. Alright, yeah. Save it. I'm gonna save the scene as demo 5. Okay, you got it. And as usual, I'll put in a bit of a plane, a little bit of a floor in here, like that. And maybe do this. And okay, now I want to bring in a character into this scene, and one place where it is very popular to go and find characters, and there's a lot of free animations also, is Mixamo. So in Mixamo you actually you need to create an account. But once you create an account, you get access to a lot of free content. But then they want you to pay if you want to use some of the advanced features. So it is not like, it is still a commercial product. It's not like an open source thing or anything like that. It's actually Adobe that owns all of this now. So we'll start with finding a character. So there's characters and animations. So there are 2 options. So we can start with characters just to bring in the model to begin out. And you can see that there is quite a lot of characters in here. See, I think I'm showing a lot of characters here. 96. Yeah, okay. So we can just bring in, we can select something that we like. Now, maybe I'll take a look at this one. Use this character. We can preview everything that we're getting in this window over here. So this is the character that we could bring in, for example. And then when we have it selected, we can download the character. And we should download it in the T-pose position. And we can also actually say we want this as an FBX for Unity specifically. So we'll do FBX for Unity and T-pose when we download this character. And it takes a moment, and it will give you a file that you can then copy into your Unity projects, downloading the assets. Here it comes, 28 megabytes. We'll let it finish. Okay, there you go. Now it is here. I can copy it and put it into my drive in projects. So it's and I'm gonna make a new folder in Unity for characters. So now I'm gonna put this guy in here, and here he is. And when I go back to Unity, I should find him. He'll get loaded automatically for us. There's some thing about the normals that have to be fixed. That's automatic. Should be okay. We can select the character here, and we can see him actually down in this preview window at the bottom. Okay. When you bring in this guy into Unity, then the Unity is providing actually one more, you could say, animation system, although it is sitting on top of the skeletal animation, and that is a muscle system. So Unity is actually bringing together a few bones. It's allowing you a slightly higher level control, if you like, to humanoids. So giving you kind of a bit more power over, like basically assuming that this is a human person. There's a certain range of movement that the muscles provide of the human body, and it will give you sliders for these muscles. but only if you indicate this specifically, this skeleton, as a humanoid skeleton. So because this is a humanoid, we can let Unity know that this, it can assume that we can use the Unity's muscle structure for humanoid animation. And if we go and press rig here, the animation type is currently generic, which means that we can do just a regular skeletal animation, raw skeletal animation. But if we want to use Unity's muscles, we go and do a humanoid, and then it will create what is called an avatar for us, which is basically like the strings for our puppet that we are going to be controlling, and we can just let Unity create that for this model specifically. So let's just do that here and apply. Well, let's look at the animations for a second. If we need to do something, there are no animations included in the basic model, so I don't think we have to do anything over here. We just have to make sure the rig is correct, and we do apply. And if we want to test the model that we have retrieved and possibly fix some issues with how Unity interprets the skeleton and the muscles, we can press configure, and we see the model here, and we see the skeleton in green in here, and we can look at the different muscles that Unity has assigned to this model, and we can do things like twist the model and see how the different limbs go in and out and things like that, or just reset it. So it looks like Unity has properly interpreted this as a humanoid and is able now to give us control over the different muscles in the body. So we are okay now. Now we can say done, and we can bring now this whole character into the scene, place it anywhere we want there. It is not facing the camera, so maybe I should move it around just a little bit, so the camera can come a little closer. So now we can see the character in the game view over here. So it is not doing much. We have only now, the only thing we have done is to bring in a character that is ready for animation. And now let's find an animation that we want this character to have. But first, before we do that, let's take a look at the character that I brought in. So this is a character, and it comes with a component that is called the animator component. And this is very important, that anything that you want to animate needs this animator component as part of it. And it refers to the avatar that was generated for us, the interface basically to our skeleton that is underneath. And then it also refers to an animation controller for this character, which we do not yet have. It's empty. Let's actually create the controller for it, so that we can be ready to start moving it around. So I'm gonna make a new controller, and it's very easy to make an empty controller. You can just right click into your projects and say create, and then an animation controller right there, and this allows us to name it something, and our character is called ExoRed, so we can just call it an ExoRed controller maybe. And then I can drag the controller into the controller slot. So now this character has a controller, and with the character selected I can switch to animator view, and this is the controller right now. It's empty. There are no animation clips in it, there are just states in it. In particular, there's an entry state, but there are no animation states. And I'm gonna go now and get an idle motion from Mixamo. I can now switch to animations, not characters, but animations. And a lot of these things are motion captured, so they're kind of high quality, but you can get all kinds of stuff here. In fact, there are 26 pages of animations right now, and each page is 96 animations. There's a lot of animation, so you should use the search to find what animations you want. So if we want to start with idle things, let's just search for idle. So now we get idles, and we can just do a kind of a comfortable standing idle with little motion. I mean, the idles should not really be like, for this one, it shouldn't really be looking around that much, doing stuff like that. But let's just take maybe this one. Well, let's take this one. Maybe he just stands around, not doing very much. Okay, let's see how this looks like. We can see what it looks like on our model here. So this is kind of neat. This is just a very basic idle, just standing, not totally dead. And then we can do a download, and you have the option of bringing in the model at the same time, but let's try now just to do it without the skin. So this is just the skeleton information about like how to move the skeleton. So, and everything else is fine. I mean, download this animation, and it comes back here. It's pretty small, and we show it, and we get the copy this, and we go into characters here, and we drop it in there, and it should come into our project, and it comes in here. But remember that this animation was created in Mixamo for the Mixamo character, but we already kind of retargeted the character in Unity when we brought it in. We told Unity to interpret it as a humanoid and create a special avatar, kind of an avatar rig for it in Unity. So if we just bring in any animation, it won't necessarily play on that avatar and that character unless we bring it exactly into the same rig. And now so for this animation, first of all, we have to tell it that this should be applied to a humanoid, and then, and this is important, that there's no information about the character really in this. It's just the animation in itself. So we have to bring in the avatar definition from our model that we brought in earlier. So I'm going to do a copy from another avatar, and then I'm going to find the source. I'm going to do the target here, and this guy was called ExoRed, right? So Unity has already created this ExoRed avatar here. So I'm going to use exactly the same avatar now for this animation as the one with the basic model. So now I've associated with this avatar, and I can do apply now. Let's hope this works, of course. So now I have this animation imported into Unity, and I can drag it into the animator animation controller, or the animator for this character as a clip, and you can see it is here now. And now I just cross my fingers and see what happens, and it works, luckily for us. So you can see the animation is now already playing inside Unity. You can actually see that it played once and then stopped. So it is not a great idle in that sense, that if it just goes to the end and then becomes still. So we might have to take a look at this idle animation again and look at the animation tab for this animation that we imported. So when we select something down in the project, just in general, just so that you know, when we select something down in the project and go into the inspector to fix some things, we are basically fixing the import options for Unity. So we are not fixing a specific instance, we're fixing how Unity imports these things. So we are now selecting the animation down here and selecting the animation tab, and we can look at the animation settings, and there's loop time as one of the import animation settings for this animation. We do that and we say so time gets looped, and we loop the pose indefinitely by clicking this. And we might have to apply these changes to the import. We apply them, and then we should try playing it again. And now we see down here the clip played, and if it is set up correctly, it should start over again at the beginning. Yes, so now it's looping. So this here is our idle motion within the controller. The next step that we want to do is that let's say that whenever we are creating a character, we might want to sketch out what are the different idles that we want. What are the different kind of states that the character would be in. Okay, we know that, okay, we have a standing state right now, a standing kind of a standing around state. Let's say that we have someone that is like wants to attend a party or something, and we want them also to be able to sit, for example. So that's another state that the character would be in, also an idle state. We just want the character to sort of sit idly. Let's go again into this here, into Mixamo. We have all the idles picked here. We have a sitting here. Oh, here we have a nice sitting idle. Oh, this is pretty good. So here he's sitting. We could make him a chair, of course. Otherwise, this looks a bit funny. To sit like this in the air. This is an exoskeleton. Maybe he's able to sit in the exoskeleton. But let's download this one also without the skin. And download it. And that will be pretty quick. Small clips. We go and we get it, and we copy it, and we go back in here, characters, and we drop it in there, and we go back into Unity, and again we have to look at the import options for the sitting idle. We have to make sure that it's a humanoid rig, and it's again using the same avatar that we had created before, the Exored avatar, so they're all using the same one. And then I apply that. Animations, now we know that we have to do loop time and loop pose for this animation. So I have now a second idle, and I can take that sitting idle and drag it into the controller. I can arrange this a little bit like this. Maybe, well, I can do it like that. So I have a standing idle and I have a sitting idle, and what would make sense is that the sitting idle becomes activated when the state of the character is sitting, and that state could be stored as a boolean, and the animation controller right here allows us to define several variables that change the states of the animations. And we can just go into what is called parameters for this controller, and here we set up all the variables that we can refer to in our transitions between different animation clips. And let's create a boolean in here, a boolean called sitting. This can be either true or false, and we can say that we'll start in an idle position. So this orange color indicates that this is the starting clip. I could make this the starting clip by right clicking on it and say set as default state. As you can see now, if I play, let's just see if it comes out correctly. He starts like this, okay, but I still want to make him start as a standing, so I'm going to make this the default one, and then make the transition to the sitting one dependent on the state of the sitting variable. So I can right click on the idle animation and do make transition. I get a little pointer, and I point it at the sitting, and I'm also going to allow him to go back to the standing one, so I can do transition back from this back up to the regular idle one. And now I have these two white arrows, and I can click, and these are transitions, and I can click on the arrow going from idle to sitting idle, and I get some information about this transition. And one of the pieces of information is the conditions. And you can see the conditions is now empty, so that means that I would just go directly there. There's no particular condition listed. But if I do plus, I can now pick from any of the parameters that I've defined in the parameter list, and I have only one, which is sitting. And I can then pick what value of that variable is needed to make the transition. And if I say that the sitting parameter has to have the value true, I've now said that it can only transition to the sitting idle if this variable becomes true. I'm now going to just let's see actually what happens now. Let's just see it for a minute. So he's standing there, he's just doing his long idling, and you notice that he goes back into this one. He's playing this clip, and I'm gonna do sitting. He's still not sitting yet, but let's see. Now he sits, and he goes right back up. And why is that? That's because the transition out still has no conditions. So we again have to put in a transition that says, okay, when I'm no longer sitting, basically when sitting is false, that's when I want to go out. So that will work. But there's another thing I wanted to show to here. When I press sitting, he doesn't sit right away. He's still waiting for this animation to finish, the idle for the standing one. And it's very lousy if I have changed my state, I've changed my parameter, but I'm still playing the old animation because it hasn't finished. And then only once it finished, it will switch. So I have to take a look at this transition again and look at this one parameter here. This one actually says has exit time. So it is actually set here, which means that the outgoing animation, the one that is you're leaving, is using its exit time to allow you before the transition happens. So it will go to its exit time, and then you get the transition. But let's just say it doesn't have any such particular exit time, basically meaning that it can exit at any time. There's no particular exit time. So that means that this transition will now ignore where I am in the standing animation and just go straight into the sitting. I'll do the same for the other one. I'll do uncheck the has exit time. So now I'm going to try this again. He's standing, and I do sitting, and he sits. And I do I uncheck sitting, and he stands. So going between the two idles is now very simple. You can see, of course, that I'm doing this inside the viewer. I'm doing it in the animator view here to set the parameter. Obviously, in the game, you're not going to be clicking with the mouse into this parameter list to change animations. So you would want to do this inside your code, obviously. So what we need to do to access the sitting state from the code is you can do it from a script, of course. You can just add a behavior script to the character, a C++ script, a new script, and let's just call it keyboard control script. And we will, oh, it already exists. I'll just call it then, I guess, exo red keyboard control. Okay, now we get this, and I have the script. I get the script window, and the first thing we have to do is that we have to get a hold of our animator. Okay, here we go. So this is just a member variable of the type animator, which can then hold the specific reference to the specific animator that we have created for this character. And this animator is contained within the animator components. So we can do okay, so this is the animator component that we are getting. This is actually the animator component of the object that we want the reference to. So get component. Okay. Oh. No, we just. So I'm just getting the component animator for this object, and now I can access any of the things inside that animator component. And I'm going to, well, we can do different things, I suppose, but let's do. So the way that you can access the parameters is through the set commands on the animator. So the set command, where you can set a bool value, you can set an integer value, a floater value, you can set different values, and you can see up here when you look at the parameters that you can have floating parameters, int parameters, bool parameters, and trigger parameter. Let's say that we basically, this is a bool parameter, so we want to do set bool, and we can say set bool to true or false. And so in our code we could do set bool, and we can do, and so we can use the name of the variable here, which is sitting, and then we can do something here, and we can have that be based on maybe a key. And for now, let's say if we want to switch between sitting and standing, for example. So we could actually do another thing here, I guess. I know this is a bit crude here. So we could do this. Oh. And then you can do a key down. Maybe S. And then is this working? I don't know. So what I'm trying to do is then have the S key as a toggle. So when you press the S key, it will go into the other type of sitting position, standing or sitting position. And then I'm sending that value into the, actually I don't have to set it every time I update. I just have to do that here. Okay. So I'm updating the state in the animation controller. Let's see. And I'm pressing S, so I pressed S, I press it again. So now I can toggle between these two things just by pressing my keyboard key here. So that's kind of neat. So I can change what he's doing. So I can say, okay, I'm going to sit here. I'll press this and I'll sit. Okay. Now if I want to do something more, let's say that like I want to, so this is my basic idles here, but now I want to do an action. I want an action now. What kind of action should we do? Any ideas? Something we can do with our hands? Or I think there was a pray even. Let's see if they have that. Okay, let's do this one just for this here. Okay, that's an interesting action. Alright, we get that one again without the skin. Alright, just there. Playing here. And yeah, maybe we want to have it looping also. And the rig humanoid and get the avatar from the existing one, which is this one, and apply it, and it should be ready now. And I'm first going to show you how you could possibly put it into the same controller place here. And now I'm going to make transition from this. No, I'm going to do it from the standing one here to here. But I'm going to make it based on maybe well, actually, so let's actually do one thing. This is an action, so I'm going to think of it as an action and not as an idle. So I'm going to edit this again. I'm not going to use it a looping one. I'm not going to make it looping. So I'm going to go back here and change it to not looping. So like that. So it's just one action, and the action looks like this. So just the hands come together, and that's it for a little bit. Okay. So, and then I'm gonna go into it by using now a toggle. So this is a praying action, and I'm gonna create a new parameter called a trigger. Sorry, a trigger parameter, and the trigger is just pray. And so the trigger is it's basically it becomes true, but it then just immediately becomes false. So it's just it's like a one-shot true value that might trigger something, but it doesn't stay true after that. So it's great for triggering things once, and it is very much like a similar thing as when you do a collision trigger, for example. So now I'm going to make this transition happen just when that trigger is triggered, and there's no true or false value associated with it, just if that trigger is triggered. Maybe you can also think of it just like an event. It's an event that happens. So if I do this and I do pray, okay, he's still doing, oh, I see, I have to take this and where was that? Has exit time, take that off again. So I can do the immediate. Okay, here we go. So, well, he didn't go back. So I can take a transition back here. So now he's doing this and he goes right back. So here I can trigger this animation just by pressing the trigger. So, well, what happens if I'm sitting? Obviously, it's not going to get into my praying. Even if I press this thing, it doesn't go into praying because there's no transition from sitting to praying. So, well, I suppose I could do another transition here, and then maybe transition back from here to here, or maybe that doesn't quite work. Well, you can see what happens. I'll put the trigger here into praying again, and no exit time. And let's see if we can go there now. So I'm sitting and I can do this. Yes, it goes up. Okay, this is just crazy. I'm getting into a bit of a weird complexity here, which could be very much solved if we could have more things happening at the same time. So because I sort of want to do an idle, and the idle can either be in here or here, but I want the praying just to happen on top of whatever idle is going on. I need to take that praying out of this part of the controller. And what is great here is that the animation controller has layers that are basically parallel layers of animation state machines. So I can take the praying just out from this, leave this as it is on this layer here, the base layer. I can add the new layer by pressing the plus, and I get a whole clean sheet here, and I can call this maybe just action layer. So I have a base idling layer and an action layer on top of it. And the action, well, I don't really have a no action right now, so I'm actually just going to use the idle animation here for the no action one. But then I can add the praying as the animation clip I want to play, as a possible action I want to make the character take. And I'm gonna make this action again happen when the trigger goes off, and it's just gonna do the praying and then go back to the idle state for the action. And this is gonna be on the trigger, which we call pray, and then go right back to idle. But if you just do it like this, you can play this and we're not going to see very much happening. Well, we have the sitting still working, hopefully. Yeah, that works as before. The praying doesn't seem to do anything. And why is that? That's because the layers have weights on them, and the weights determine how much they blend in with the other layers. And by default, any additional layers have the value of 0 as the weight. So meaning that this layer, anything that happens to this layer, is multiplied by 0 before it's blended with the other one. So this one is basically not visible right now because it doesn't get any weight in the final animation. So we have to bring up this. So one thing, I'm going to show one thing. So okay, we'll just put it to 1 here. That means that they're now just both at 1, and they will both be at full force. And when I do, let's say this, nothing happens. Yeah, it is. Sorry, it is happening. Let's look at the layer here. So I had its idle here. Yeah, I did this, and then it did that all of a sudden. Yeah, oh, sorry, this one. What's happening is finishing that one and then doing the quick praying there. Okay. So this one still had the exit time, that's why it's not happening right away. Okay, so here. So now it's gonna do this. Okay. So that's pretty cool. I'm gonna go down to into the sitting for the base, but it is standing because in the action layer it is now playing the idle one, which is forcing it to stand up, to stay standing. I guess I could change the action layer down to 50% maybe. So now the sitting should actually show through. If I do sitting, but it doesn't do full sitting because now it is taking a part of the sitting and blending it with the standing in the action layer. So the action layer is trying to pull the sitting a little bit up because it has a standing idle. Now this is a problem. What also we would like to do is possibly to do praying while sitting. But as you remember, maybe if I do praying is a standing praying animation. You can see it also here. This is actually what the praying animation looks like. So does it only apply then if you're standing? Do we have to find another sitting praying animation? Well, no, we don't have to do that. We can actually isolate the action layer to a part of the body, and that we can do through masks. And so if we just want to use the praying and apply the praying to the hands of the character, we can say that the action layer should use a mask that isolates the hands. There's no mask here right now. We have to create one, and down here in our project we can do create and then new animation, the avatar mask, like this, and we can do this exo red action mask maybe, and then for this layer here we can now pick this mask, and then we can edit this mask. We can pick this and open it. Where do we open it? Here we go. So this is the mask, and the mask by default is showing the entire body, but we can turn off parts of the body. So if we just say everything below the waist is going to be turned off, we can do that. We can try that. And now when we go back here, and we can even just say that this one is now full 1 in weight, because then that means that the base layer will still have complete control over the legs, but the action layer is pretty much taking over control of the upper body. So maybe that's what we want. So here he's standing, and let's see if we can pray. He's praying, and now we can sit and he prays. So we have now allowed the praying to take place on top of any of the states that are being maintained in the base layer, because we have now isolated the action to the hands. So this is the basis for animation control for characters in Unity. From this you can of course create a much more complex state machine. So but I advise you to think in terms of a base layer that sets up all of the idles as in terms of the kind of like the legs of the character, especially what is the character doing with this? Is it walking? Is it sitting? Is it standing? These types of things you can set up as a state machine in here, and then have that be controlled by a state parameter. But then you can create an action layer on top of it, like this one. Maybe just a layer for gestures, maybe just a layer for the head movements or facial expressions and things like that. And those could be controlled by parameters that are triggers, like an action that is like a one-shot action. You can also control things from float variables. So if you have a float here, and so you can call this here, let's say anger, like this. And you could say that you have a layer up here, a layer that you kind of want to be saying that be facial expression. I'm not going to do this now because, but I'll show you what I'm thinking here. I can create a layer that is facial expression. I can create a new mask for that layer that only uses the face, or it could even just manipulate morphs and not really manipulate the skeleton in any way. So that might actually also be a way to isolate it from everyone else. But this, the states that I might create for this layer here, the transitions in that, let's say there's a transition here. This transition could be conditioned on the anger, which I can now find as a parameter, being greater than say 0.5. So I've now created a condition that looks at a specific threshold in a float variable. And then from inside our code, we could be updating the anger from different events that occur. Like every time you kick the guy, the anger goes up by 0.1. Next time you kick him, it kicks higher and higher and higher. And once the anger has reached 0.5, this transition happens. And now you start playing this animation. Maybe you morph into the face into a different expression over here. So this is something to play with, something that you can take a look at. Maybe the last thing I just want to mention, we haven't really looked inside, so what we have been doing here is really just focus on the controller, how you set up the controller for characters. But if you want to also look at what these animations are doing, you can select this character here, and you can open, there's a window, animation here. There's a special window called animation, and it will show you something like this for the character that you have selected. And it will show you all of the animations that we have brought in for this character. So we have the idle, we have the sitting idle, and we have the praying. It's all here. They're all read-only. It actually by default makes it everything that you import as read-only. It's still connected through the importer, so it wants to make sure that it's controlling everything, that it's actually still in charge of this through the importer. But you can actually make copies of this and change it that way, or you can make new animations from scratch if you like. But what you're seeing here are all these keyframes in the animation. So this is the time axis, and what you're seeing on this vertical axis here, because this is a humanoid, notice that. And we told Unity that if we wanted to use the muscle humanoid system, these are actually the muscles that the Unity is giving us access to. So these are muscles that are like the in-out ranges for different parts of the body, like arms out, arms in type of values. And we can basically see that this head nod here is happening here, in these specific places. So the value is changing in these places, and then it interpolates between these values. We can also look at the curves for this, so we can see that this value of the head is moving from here to a little bit up here, and then down again over here. You can see maybe a little bit more. So we can see how this particular value is changing over time in this curve editor. And I can actually see any of the curves. I can click on any curve. If the curve doesn't show up in the window, I just have to press F, and it will show me, it will frame the curve perfectly in the window. So I can see how all of these things are changing as part of this one animation. I can select more than one curve also, just like this, and I can see how these curves are changing. So I could manipulate them if I make not a read-only copy of it. I can play the animation also, and I can see how these things are changing over time. I can see it in the dope sheet. This is called a dope sheet, which is basically the keyframe editor. And I can see how it's quickly going through all the different positions that we're storing. And if I want to do an animation here, a new one, I could do, okay, I'm going to do it here. I could, in my project, right click and say create animation, which is this, and this is just called, I would call exo test anim, like this. And I can stick my animation into the controller, and in the animation view I can now find my test animation. There's my test animation. But a new animation does not have control any aspect of the character yet. We have not told it what to animate. An animation clip like this can in fact animate any aspect of any game object in Unity. We are now associating this with the extra red game object. And when I say add property on this clip, I can access any of the properties associated with the extra red. But I have to be very careful about what I pick here. I mean, I could really ruin the character if I go in and change stuff in the character that like does not play well with its, for example, the other animations. And for example, this is a humanoid character again, and it's using the muscle system to do animation. If I now create an animation here that bypasses the muscle system, for example, by going directly into the skeleton and moving a joint, these things are not going to play well together. So if I want to create an animation for a humanoid character in Unity, I have to go through the animator to pick my parameters. Instead of going into, say, the transform directly, going to the hips here, I can go here into the skeleton, actually, and pick a bone in the skeleton. But that's absolutely horrible for the animator that has already been told that this is a humanoid with muscles. So let's go through the animator here instead and find the muscle that we want to move. And we can find a muscle like, I don't know, jaw close. I don't know if that's gonna do anything. You know, if you can, here's the jaw. Okay, so and then we can play this animation. Okay, it's just sitting there while we look at it. Oops. Probably I have to associate this animation with the right avatar also, so that it positions it correctly. So in here is the test one. Where is it? This one. Yeah. Okay. Now we have. Well, I'm just gonna show you how we can make this animation here at least work in terms of this jaw. Oh, this guy here. I'm gonna play it on this guy here. Okay. So let's see if we can make the jaw do something. Here's the curve. Can you see it moving now? It's a little bit. I can. Let me bring the camera a little bit closer so I can, like, closer to the face. Here. There you go. And I go back to the animation here. I'm gonna look at the curve and I'm gonna loop it. Okay, that's what the jaw is doing. It's actually not opening the mouth, so maybe we should do that. But you can see that it's chewing on something, right? So now maybe we should call this chewing. So this is how you could then, now this clip, this movement of this joint, this muscle is now stored in this project right here. So this is one way that we can start making our own stuff now from scratch. But I'm going to stop here, and this animator should still work if we just go and play the character again. Right there. Okay, yeah, that was because our camera. We moved the camera. Just look at this other thing. So here we go. Here we go. And then we can do sitting like that. And that's all working. Still working. And we can do the praying there. Okay. Okay. That's all. So that's all for now, and you will work on something like this tomorrow as a reaction to the player coming closer to the character. Were there any questions? Let me just stop the recording here, but you can post questions on Piazza also. But I'll see you tomorrow.